It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle, Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, and together we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure you check out our channel on YouTube, or, of course, you can always check out the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. We are currently recording this while watching a not exciting NFL game between the Saints and the Broncos, and this is how we get through these times, Andrew. We record and we talk about future NFL players rather than watching the present ones.
This is why we are so passionate about scouting NFL draft prospects so that we know exactly what we're watching when we get to see Spencer Rattler.
Yes. It's fun, man. And we were really big Paulson Adebo fans a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, he didn't have the best night. Personally, he got carted off. So, not all good, but fun to see guys that we liked in earlier draft cycles as well.
Yeah, I really apologize to everybody for making a snake pun here after the Rattler comment, but the New Orleans Saints do seem a bit snake bitten by the injury bug. They just can't. I know that was bad, but they just cannot stay healthy. It was like a great start, and then they just faded hard, as you would expect from a Dennis Allen team, not to be competent, but they just don't even have a chance. Nobody on that team is healthy that matters, and so hopefully they'll get things turned around. But yeah, I mean, we're stuck with a bad Thursday night football matchup, but we did have a really great week 6, and that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight. So we'll review how the 2024 rookies did this past weekend, and then we'll also highlight some of the 2025 NFL draft prospects that we really liked. So I'll get things kicked off with a rookie, and I'm going to go with safety Evan Williams out of Oregon, who was a 4th-round pick of the Green Bay Packers. And, this is risking me being a gigantic homer, and that's fair. That's fine. Of course, Packer fan, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the shirt. But I will counter that homer acquisition because I didn't really fall in love with the Evan Williams pick right away. I had not watched him. So all I knew about him was the little bit that I had heard from others, certainly being on the all-star circuit. But boy, as it turned out, I should have had him on my list to watch. He is currently PFF's number 1 or number 2 ranked safety. Can't remember which one. And so you can take PFF with all of the grain of salt you want, but he has been fantastic so far. He's been really versatile. He's lined up at free safety 98 times, slot 21 times, and in the box 25 times. So he's being used all over the place, and he's being really successful each of the places he's used. He currently has 11 tackles and 3 assists with only 2 missed tackles. And you could say, hey, 2 missed tackles, that's not good. He already has a forced fumble. So that probably makes up for the 2 missed tackles. He's also been targeted 9 times in coverage. He's given up 5 catches for just a 55.6% completion percentage, but he has 2 pass breakups and 1 interception. So that's a pretty darn good success rate, both from a completion percentage standpoint and turning things over, making plays on the ball. He has been a big part of the Packers safety room, going from a massive liability to an absolute big time strength. So a big shout out for a 4th-round rookie that I did not have graded, but has really made me look like a fool for leaving him off of my list.
I was just going to say, so we build our watch list, right? Like the guys that we have to watch, priority. Make sure that you're watching all the guys that are going to go on day 1 and day 2 for sure, and then sprinkling in the guys like the day 3 guys as you get time, right? And Evan Williams was literally the next guy down on my to watch list on safety. And I was like, I moved on, I think, to interior offensive line and some guys I wanted to watch. Never got back to him. So I'm with Andrew that never watched him. And then, of course, now he's making plays in his rookie year that just makes you look ridiculous. So good for him. Off to a fantastic career start with the Green Bay Packers. I am also going to go with a little bit of a homer here, not because they're a Packer player, but because this is a player I loved throughout the process last year, and that's quarterback Drake Maye of the New England Patriots, of course, out of UNC. And he got his first start in the NFL this past week, and it was not a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination, not even close. He had plenty of ugly moments in this football game, but that is to be expected for a first start in the NFL. He threw an interception, I think, may have been his third or fourth pass of the game on the second drive. But he had a second interception that was total luck. So if you just look at, the box score, you see two interceptions, but really it was just that first one that was a bad overthrow. But the flashes were there. The deep throw to Keyshawn Boutte on the end of the second quarter there was a thing of beauty. Showed a really nice connection with Demario Douglas. Did some really nice things with his legs, just creating something when nothing is there. So the offensive line in New England, I think everybody knows this is not a revelation. Offensive line is really, really bad, bad. And so what he was able to do on Sunday, I think, was a really, really encouraging showing given what's out there around him. His wide receivers had some bad drops as well. And so you have to factor all those things in. Early on in the game, there was definitely a disconnect between the lower half of his body and his feet and what he was trying to do with his arm. But as he settled into the game, you definitely felt him get more comfortable, and those things kind of worked well together instead of looking disjointed. So I think as he settles in, plays more games, I think you're going to see all of that kind of come together and him calm down and get more comfort. Hopefully that's true and the offensive line doesn't totally screw that up. I really just hope the offensive line doesn't ruin him early on in his career. But lots of room for growth. But I think if you're a Patriots fan, also lots of room for optimism here. And I will just say, as we look to 2025, we've got to get this guy some offensive line. And I think that would be a huge, huge difference for this New England team. But a pretty good start for Drake Maye.
Yeah, kind of it seemed like a questionable decision for New England to throw Maye out in his first start against this Houston Texans pass rush. Given what the New England offensive line has done so far this year, and poor Jacoby Brissett just getting battered left and right. It's like maybe Drake could have waited one more week to get his first start. But, certainly looked really, really good. Kind of a funny story. I don't know if this is funny so much, but New England reportedly put out a release that Drake Maye had an MRI on his knee this week. And nothing was wrong. It came back all clear, and he was back at practice and walking around. There's no brace. He wasn't limping, anything like that. But the way it was phrased was Drake Maye requested an MRI. It's like, yeah, playing behind that offensive line, I would too, just in case.
I feel terrible after playing behind those guys, and I don't know if I want to do it again next week. No, I think he's
could you find something wrong so I don't have to have this undrafted free agent left tackle, please?
Yeah, can we put Jacoby back out there? Because that was kind of rough. But
this is like Michael Pittman being like, I might have to go on injured reserve. Oh, wait, Anthony Richardson isn't starting and Joe Flacco is. I can play.
I'm back. That's so funny. Oh, geez. I've never seen, if you play fantasy football, you get, all the notifications. I don't know that I've ever seen a notification that, comes in and, shows that a player is active, Pittman's did. You get all the injury stuff, but it was has moved from whatever it was to active, and it was so confusing. There's weird stuff going on in the NFL. That is the bottom line. But we're going to turn the page to 2025, talk about some of these guys that are catching our attention on Saturdays. So Andrew's got a fun one teed up here in a tight end. So let's talk about this guy.
Yeah, this is the second time I've gone with a Michigan player already this year, so I got to knock that off. No more liking Michigan players. That's a Kyle thing. But I'm going to go with tight end Colston Loveland. He's a really promising athlete, a gritty tight end prospect. He's got fun receiving upside because he's an outstanding route runner with strong hands. He catches the ball away from his body, and he can use his side to shield himself from defenders. He's electric after the catch. He quickly transitions from a receiver to a runner and shows excellent quickness. His speed is more than just straight line speed. I'm not sure he's like a seam buster, but he can get after you if you leave him against a slower linebacker. He can be nasty in the run game. He wants to block, and he does an effective job. His pad level isn't great, and I'm not sure he's necessarily the strongest guy, but I think those areas are easy to see where the improvement can come. The willingness to block for me is a much bigger deal than the fundamentals at this point. There are times when you get rerouted by stronger players. Overall, his play strength and pad level can improve, but he's everything you want in a tight end prospect in the line. And I'm not saying he's these guys, but like a Kittle, a Hawkinson, maybe a more recent example, a Tucker Kraft, a guy who is going to be a really, really impactful blocker, but also has all of the receiving chops to be really good in those areas as well. So far this season, pretty modest production, 29 receptions on 41 targets, 261 yards, 2 touchdowns. Michigan's having some quarterback problems. So you can kind of understand tight end production is not a big deal when it comes to draft prospects. It never has been. I want to see those skill sets, and Loveland has everything, I think, to be a potential first round pick, and testing may have something to do with that. I think for me, I need to break away from caring about testing with tight ends so much and start to look at the tape in like a 90% and the testing in a 10% sort of way. But Colston Loveland checks all the boxes that you want in a modern dual threat tight end.
Yeah, so you're saying that he needs to transfer to Iowa. That's the next step in his. It is funny that, like, I mean, this just constant stream of players that come through Iowa is pretty amazing. But Loveland has been a guy that's been talked up, obviously, by Homer Michigan fans for a long time. But he's being noticed now, of course, in draft circles, and that's going to be in his future as well. So exciting to get a taste of what could be tight end 1 there in the 2025 class. I'm going to talk about another player who's been on the radar for a long time, but is just now, I think, making a good case for why that's been the case. And that's Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. And it's a player that I've been kind of infatuated with for a while, not even because I'm convinced that he's going to be this dominant NFL wide receiver, but more so just because I think he's so good, and yet figuring out exactly how his skill set is going to translate to the next level is really fascinating to me, because he's a very, very good route runner. He's smooth in all facets of his game. He does everything really, really smoothly. He's a bully at the catch point, and he really has like this intense my ball perspective. And it's important because he's not incredibly fast, and he's not someone who's going to create this like field of separation because of his speed and that he doesn't have that ability, but he's really, really good. And I kind of think he's suited to kind of be that second or maybe third, but probably can be like the second target in an NFL offense and a passing attack that can be that like reliable outlet for his quarterback who can work in the short and the intermediate areas of the field. He's just not going to be that deep threat. But at the same time, there's plenty of amazing acrobatic catches in the end zone where he's just able to go up and get it. So understanding what you see on film and like anticipating, is all of it going to translate to the NFL, is I think where I get hung up a little bit. But I love the player, and I love the person here. I love the interviews. Andrew and I talked about this on the last couple of shows, that like this is a guy who puts the work in, the work ethic is there, and I think the football character is certainly there for him to have an NFL career. So checks all of those boxes. In 2025, he started out the first beginning of the season here with 30 receptions, 433 yards, and 5 TDs. So he's got the statistics to back up what he was hoping to do coming into this season. I really believe Egbuka is going to be really good at what he does. I do believe he's a player with a ceiling, though. So what's that worth? I guess this is my big question, is like, I'm going to be so fascinated throughout the process in the spring and as we get close to the draft. is this a player who can go first round? Like we see him right now getting mocked kind of in that late first round area. And I'm just so curious. And I think it is probably impacted because of the draft class we just came off of with someone like Marvin Harrison Jr., with, Adunze, with Neighbors, to try to figure out, like, this is a player who thought about coming out last year. And I think trying to stack him in that group, he'd probably be wide receiver 6 or 7 in last year's class. But in this year's class, like, he's a good player. Like, where does that player go in this upcoming class is going to be fascinating. But love him. I think he's going to be a really nice piece for an NFL team once he gets to the league.
Yeah, and I really, really like him. Early on, I had heard some comparisons to JSN, and I think that's probably an Ohio State thing.
Sure.
I think there is some similarities to their game. The smoothness, I think, like the catch point stuff, the route running, like that makes sense to me. I don't know that he is going to get into that stratosphere. I wouldn't take him in the teens necessarily, but I think he has everything that you would want for a really, really productive NFL wide receiver. I would not be surprised if he ends up being a better pro than a college player. And, I think testing is going to be really interesting because we sort of saw this with Garrett Wilson, even Olave. Like, I think they all ran faster than what we anticipated. Now, those guys were blazers, but we thought, like, these are really fast players, and then they had like elite speed testing numbers. I'm wondering if maybe Egbuka falls into that category and he just tests really well and that shoots him up draft boards. I comfortably think that you could take him in day 2, have him step in right away and be a contributor. Like, I would love, love, love to see him go to a team where he can work with a really good quarterback and just be productive, go to Buffalo and be kind of like a, number 2 with Josh Allen, or see him get some opportunities to play right away, because I think his skill set actually is very translatable. But I agree, the ceiling may not be as high as somebody like Teteroa McMillan, who we've talked about, like super high ceiling, but Egbuka is going to have a much, much, much safer floor. So really, really interesting prospect. I think I say interesting. He's probably a boring guy. I think, like, you're going to watch him and you're going to be like, okay, this guy's really good at everything. Maybe not great at anything, but in the NFL that plays.
Yes.
And that's what I want.
Yeah, I agree.
Is he going to end up in Green Bay?
I haven't watched his blocking in 2025, but I do remember him being, I think, a pretty good blocker in the past. And he's just the guy who does all the right things, doesn't care if he's always the guy getting the ball. And I've had that thought, like, as a Packer fan, I'm like, this feels like a Matt LaFleur kind of a wide receiver, which, like, there's so many weapons in that Green Bay offense right now. But yeah, he is, I think boring is a really, really good descriptor. But I think that's what's so, as like, I don't want to miss on this guy and be too low on him, because he really doesn't, like, he doesn't separate like incredibly well. So you're like, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's the thing that I always keep coming when I see the catches, see the highlights and the tape, is like, when like the quarterback doesn't care either. He gets it to where he's at on the field, and it doesn't matter that he has a defender on him. He seems to always come up with the catch. And so the question is, like, does that translate? Because it should, but it just makes you nervous. But there's no reason. I agree. I said, and you said, there's a ceiling to this player, but I think JSN is more than an Ohio State thing. I think there's a lot there, especially if he's able to run a lot out of the slot. I think there's a lot of similarities there. But I do think that, like, an Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, no one thinks of that player as like having a ceiling. But I do think, like, if he hits like his full potential, maybe he's like the Amon-Ra St. Brown to like a fully developed Jameson Williams, like, kind of dynamic. So you don't want to put a ceiling on that, because that's incredibly valuable. But at the same time, like, boring is, I feel like, a very fair descriptor for what you feel when you watch the tape.
Yeah, it's just like he's never been the best receiver on his team. in college. Like never. This is a guy who's, I mean, I think he actually dates back to Olave and
he's been there forever.
Yeah, like I think he's played with Olave and Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison. Now they have Jeremiah Smith. Like he's always kind of been the other guy in the room.
Yeah.
Before, like he wasn't even a guy in the room. He was just kind of like fourth or fifth string. But like he can play, and I sort of jokingly brought up the Packers because seemingly outside of Christian Watson, they just have a lot of guys that are so smooth, such good route runners, good hands. But I think that kind of plays all across the Shanahan tree. Like San Francisco's probably not, well, maybe they decide that they want to add a third wide receiver to Pearsall and Ayuk, because I think Debo is probably gone, so Egbuka could make sense there. I think the Rams would be a scary good fit. As a potential like next in line to Cooper Kupp. Also, they love playing through wide receivers. And Atlanta, right?
Yes, I was just going to say the Falcons
out of the tree. I think he could step in and be number 2 right there. Well, Mooney's pretty.
But I mean,
pretty fantastic number 2. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota is another really. Like, don't give Minnesota another weapon, please.
Yes,
but like, I think he fits in so well with that tree that I think you could see him land in a lot of places and be really, really productive.
No, I agree. And I just, like I said, draft capital is going to be fascinating because it doesn't feel like he's a first round pick, but these are the guys. They go early, mid second round, and then they carve out NFL careers that we talk about for a long time. And we go, what was it that we overlooked? And sometimes it's just because they were so good, like everything was smooth and everything was boring and we missed it. So maybe that's Egbuka in this draft cycle.
Yeah. So you want to wrap up?
Yeah, it's been fun. We're going to continue to go through this 2025 class with you guys. So stick with us. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Tell a friend. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft Fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.